And I'll hit record here and we'll get this thing going. Give it a couple minutes to, a couple seconds to start recording. All right, I think we're ready to go. All right. What's up, everybody, and welcome to Bump and Run. I'm Pete Colasano, and Scotty is not with us today. Normally, Scott Bracey is here as my partner in crime, but not today. He is on assignment. I believe he's in Denver trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with the Broncos, but that's a conversation for another day. Joining me today is cousin Ralph. Ralph, how you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. He's there with his cute little dog. I don't know if the dog has any pick. Maybe the dog can make some picks because my picks have been absolute dog shit, and kind of apropos that you have the dog in the picture. So we're going to do a slightly modified format today. We're going to do kind of a 3-2-1 format. We're going to do 3 NFL stories, 2 college football stories, 1 HL story, and we'll leave it at that for today. So let's get right to it. One of the interesting things that happened in the NFL last week, I'm sure as you were watching, is that 2 of the more popular, we'll say, or how do I say them differently? How about 2 of the most successful quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 10 to 20 or 25 years, depending on which one we're talking about, and depending on what we're talking about, Super Bowls or MVPs or just winning or stats, whatever you want to say, but 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league have been Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. And I actually thought that last weekend was kind of a microcosm of the difference between those 2 guys. So you have Aaron Rodgers, who is kind of prickly. Yeah, right. He's like kind of prickly. He's kind of always got snarky shit to say. He's smarter than everyone in the room. It's never his fault. It's never on him. He's always got an excuse. And then you have Tom Brady, who's kind of the ultimate team guy, the ultimate leader, kind of put it on my shoulders, fire the team up, not to go pout, but to get in guys' faces to kind of, get them to pick their game up. And it's exactly what we saw on Sunday, right? We saw Green Bay shrunk to the occasion against Detroit, and the Tampa Bay Bucks with Tom Brady, who looked like just absolute shit for most of the game for, what was it, 45 seconds or something in that range, on that last drive, takes him down the field and they win the game. So
that's why Tom Brady has all those rings.
Yeah, that may have a little something to do with it, right? As you're watching those, and you're watching Rodgers on one end play against Detroit, who stinks, and you're watching Brady on the other hand at the 4:00 game playing against the Rams. Do you have different?
The Rams stink too.
They're not great, but their defense is still pretty good. They can't score. Clearly the Rams can't score. There's issues with that offense. This is something that Scotty and I have talked about a lot over the last couple of years. Really, the last year is what happens when you sell off all your draft picks, especially your high-end draft picks for players. It's great because you end up getting these high-end players that are really good. And hey, they won a Super Bowl with it. But the cost can be a long-term cost. And you're starting to see that
You're
now.
giving up your future for short-term rentals.
Absolutely. And in the Rams case, it worked, right? I don't think anybody would trade it back and not get the Super Bowl. So it's okay.
Right.
But when I hear people say, well, that's how you got to do it. Well, guess what? That only works out for one team. Everybody else who sells their future, right now, San Francisco's in a bit of a spot. They need to win right now, or else all those trades they made are going to catch up really, really soon. And then you're like, well, what do we do? Right? Do we stick with Jimmy G? Is it the young kid at quarterback? But that's where the Rams are to me. When I see the Rams, I'm like, oh, everything they've done, which was fine because it has worked and it got them a Super Bowl, it's starting to catch up a little bit because they're really thin. They're heavy on the top end. If anybody gets hurt, they're thin, which is what's happening now. And they have really no backups, and they struggle desperately on offense. Meanwhile, this was one of the best offenses in football last year. Right? What happened? You still have Stafford. You still have McVay coaching. But when you watch Aaron Rodgers on one game and Tom Brady in the other game, as you're watching that as a fan, what are your expectations? Not just what are you feeling, but you're like, what are your expectations at watching one as opposed to the other?
Well, with Aaron Rodgers, number one, he's not a likable guy. All
No,
right. So you think he's going to pull it out and it's going to
just
start
because he's
clicking for them,
talented. Yeah, just because
right?
he's a talented guy.
But he, like you said, he blames the others, you know? Brady doesn't do that. Brady
Right,
lifts his players up, but he gets into his face on the sideline,
right,
but he gets results. I
right.
mean, Aaron Rodgers quit. Basically, I don't know if I'm coming back, you know? He's got a terrible relationship with his family. I
Right.
mean, it's
That
just
says something right there, right?
crazy.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point because there's a difference between what Aaron Rodgers does, which is kind of call teammates out and coaches out in public on whether it's Pat McAfee's show or anywhere else, and what Tom Brady does is on the sideline. You don't hear that from Tom Brady in public. Like when he does his little podcast, I forget who the hell he does it with. Oh, shit. Gray. The guy's last name
Well,
is
what
Gray.
good does Aaron Rodgers serve his team by going on McAfee's show the next day and trash talking everybody? I'd rather have Brady on the sideline getting in my face, telling me to get my shit together, and then win the game, and then everything's cool.
Right.
This
No,
guy
that's
waits until the game's over and takes the bus and just drives people over the bus.
right. Oh, dude, that pretty much sums up the entire difference, right? Like you never see Aaron Rodgers really getting anybody's face on the sideline. He does it on Monday and Tuesday somewhere else.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, Tom Brady does it on the sidelines. Guess what, people? I hate to break it to everybody, but every single one of those players that Tom Brady does that to, they're used to that from the time they've been playing in like Little League. Like either your coach or your quarterback or your captain, somebody's getting in your face all the time during the game. But we would expect from our teammates not to do that in public to others after the game.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Aaron Rodgers doesn't say much during the game. We don't see him get in teammates' faces and try to do the rah-rah thing or motivate guys to play better or say, hey, this is bullshit. Step up your fucking game. Like, we got to go. We got to go. You don't see that. You see almost nothing. He's very stoic, which can be okay until Monday and Tuesday when you go on McAfee and throw everybody else under the bus. Like, that's not okay, man.
I mean, I would love to see the Bears go into Green Bay and just beat up on the Bears after what
Beat up on the
Rodgers says.
Packers.
We
Yeah.
own you. We own you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you saw those are two different teams. Those are two teams going in two totally different directions right now, right? I mean, the Bears aren't winning games, but they're certainly playing better. Right? There's no doubt that they're playing better.
Competing.
Yeah, they're competing. Justin Fields looks at least like he's learning the game, starting to become more competent. Still doesn't throw the ball very well. I have something to say about that on maybe another podcast, but for today we'll leave that alone. But yeah, I just think as I look at these two guys, both super successful. Listen, there's an argument to be made, in all honesty, that Aaron Rodgers is more talented than Tom Brady. Like, he may have a stronger arm, throws a prettier ball. He's certainly more mobile, smart guy. But that's exactly why we all now know that that is not the most important part of being a quarterback in the NFL. It's decision-making during the game, on the sidelines, after the game, leadership ability. It's funny. When you're 13-3, like last year, nobody's bad-mouthing Aaron Rodgers in the locker room or anywhere else because, we're winning. So how do we say anything? But this past week, we're starting to see like anonymous current players and not so anonymous former players talking about how Aaron Rodgers isn't a great guy and they don't love playing with him. Isn't that funny? Isn't that a surprise? I just think that's interesting, but that's really what it comes down to, right? There's one guy who's all about the team and winning, and there's another guy who's all about himself. And this weekend showed that to be the case so clearly, more than any other. And that's why I wanted to just kind of bring that up. It doesn't mean that Aaron Rodgers isn't great. I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers is great. but there's more.
Well, he thinks so.
Well, yeah, he wouldn't argue me on that fact at all, would he? Not even a little. But there's more to it than that. There's certainly more to it than that. So anyway, second thing I wanted to bring up to you. Listen, I'm a Jets fan. I was hoping that the Jets would be competitive last week. Let's be honest. I wasn't even realistically expecting a win or even hoping for a win. When we did the podcast last week with Scotty, I said, hey, there's one thing I will point out. Okay. I don't think the Jets are going to win this game, but there's one thing I'll point out. Buffalo doesn't run the football. They like to throw the football a lot. They rely heavily on Josh Allen. If there's anything that the Jets do better than maybe anybody in the NFL, that's cover with their defensive backs. They have their two starting cornerbacks on the outside, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. They're both ranked in the top 10 in PFF rankings. And I said, well, if there's anything that the Jets, if there's anything that you could point to and say, well, the Jets have a chance in this game, and it's the fact that they're going to cover, they're going to lock down these wide receivers. And from time to time, they can get after the quarterback. Well, 5 sacks and like multiple knockdowns and coverage later, the Jets beat Buffalo 20-17. And Zach Wilson, nothing to write home about other than the one last drive was okay, although it was mostly running the ball. He did throw for a couple first downs in that drive, which are important. But the thing I really wanted to ask you and talk about here, because going into that game, even though the Eagles are undefeated, Buffalo was kind of viewed as the best team in the NFL. Right. And you know what I mean? So do you watch that game and now say, yes, they're still the favorites to win the Super Bowl?
No. I think the Eagles are the clear-cut favorite right now until somebody beats them. I think Mahomes has got his team playing well.
Yeah.
Got the Chiefs playing very well. And you're living and dying with Josh Allen right now. And right now he's got owies on his elbow. So what's plan B for them?
Right.
Who's their backup in Buffalo?
Well, the backup doesn't even matter because with someone like Josh, whoever it is, doesn't even matter whether it's for Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. If you're going to be missing anybody like that, if the Jets lose their backup, or if Carolina loses your starter, or if Houston Texans lose their starter for a couple weeks, you don't even notice. But if you're going to lose a Josh Allen because of that UCL, whatever happened,
you don't replace him.
You're not replacing that. You're going to take the loss. Maybe if you were to lose him for 3 games, you would hope to just win maybe one of them and hope he gets back. If you lost him for the season, it would be over. But yeah, I agree with you 100% that something was out today that he's 81% of their offense, whether it's passing or running the ball. 81% of their offense goes through him, and this is something we talked about on this podcast for a while now. It's great and it's impressive. I mean, it's solely impressive, but I just don't know how over a 17-week season and then into the playoffs, how sustainable that is.
You got to have some sort of a running game to ultimately, make it all the way to the Super Bowl. You got to mix it up.
For sure. Like I look back even to the years that Tom Brady was really throwing the shit out of the ball in New England, whether it was when Randy Moss was there or even after that with Edelman and Gronk were there, when he would throw 40, 50 times a game. In the fourth quarter, when they had a 2-touchdown lead, they were running the ball. They were running screen passes. They were doing a lot of that running stuff, draws. They were using the run game to keep the clock going. This has been an ongoing problem with Buffalo. Now, listen, don't look. I can hear it already. Like, what are you saying? Buffalo stinks? Relax. I'm not saying Buffalo stinks. Buffalo's clearly one of the best teams in the NFL. Went to the AFC Championship last year. You mentioned Kansas City, and Kansas City is certainly a little more balanced than them. They did beat Kansas City this year.
They need a Shane Vereen coming out of the backfield.
They need something. And what's interesting about this, I think they would be well served in force feeding the run game here and there throughout the rest of the season, even if it costs them a couple wins. Force feed the run game, get your linemen in a state of mind and a frame of mind of saying we're going to run the ball, especially in the fourth quarter, even if it costs you a game or two. But if you're ready to do that once the playoffs come, then you can go back to kind of what you were doing for three quarters, which is rely on Josh Allen for three quarters, but then use that run game to close out victories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's just the way it is now. It's just the season is so long and you're relying on one guy so much. You know, he was a little off. Well, I shouldn't even say that. He didn't have a great game. I think a lot of the reason he didn't have a great game is because the Jets get after the quarterback with their four-man front. Here's something for everybody to think about. The Jets only brought more than four guys twice in that whole game. So all the sacks and all the pressure and all the hits that they put on Josh Allen was with the four-man front. This is how the Giants won 2 Super Bowls. They didn't do it with blitzing. They did it with a four-man front. They beat Tom Brady with a four-man front, right? So the Jets got after him with a four-man front and were able to cover on the outside. Boy, what a difference it would make if you could just run some draws, run some screens, just run the ball, get a first down here or there, take a little pressure off this guy because
the defense knows what's coming.
Yeah, if he's the only thing you got going and you're not even like trying to put this on anybody else, man, you're making the job a lot easier for the defensive coordinators. Now, it's never going to be easy for a defense because Josh Allen is that good, but damn, like, give him something to think about, right? Like, I don't know. Like, you can't just keep putting it on this dude and then, oh, he hurts his elbow. And it's like, well, now we're screwed. So, in fact, now that I mentioned that injury, this might be a perfect time. If he's a little banged up, this might be a perfect time to, like, force feed a running game over the next couple of weeks, even if it costs you a game. Maybe force feed that thing and, kind of see if you can build that into your offense because the way things are right now, it's too centered on one guy.
Yeah.
So, all right. One more thing in the NFL here. Ravens won. What the hell was the score of this game? I got this right here. Ravens won last week. Was this the Thursday night game?
Yeah,
this was the Monday night game. Beat the Saints 27-13. They were in control of that from the beginning. This is kind of what we've seen out of Baltimore for the last 3 years or more or less since Lamar Jackson has been here. There's this desire to include Baltimore in like that Super Bowl circle of teams that are contenders. I've been reluctant to do that because while I have said with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, I can't imagine them losing. I can't imagine them winning less than 10 games. Like, I just think they're going to be a 10-win team no matter what. Like, you're a winning team with him at quarterback. I just don't know that you're going to win a Super Bowl with him at quarterback. As you look at this team, they traded for Roquan Smith, or a little better on defense now. Are they a contender or are they just a good team?
They're just fun to watch. They're just fun to watch, but they make the playoffs one and done.
Kind of how it's been for the last few years.
Yeah, I don't see anything different happen with them. They relied on it once very, very back in the old days. They relied on a very stingy defense.
Yeah.
Now it's, run and gun, throw the ball. Where's Ray Lewis?
Yeah, I was going to say what's interesting about that point that you make is that era for the Ravens is kind of what people still have in their mind. They're like, well, that's still a really good defensive team. This is not a great defensive team. Now, they played pretty good the other night, but that's against, Andy Dalton.
Andy Dalton and the Saints, yeah.
Yeah. So, granted, like I said, I think it's a huge pickup for them to get Roquan Smith because that really solidifies things in the middle. But I'm like, dude, this has been a bad team. This is a team who has blown at least three. I might be underestimating it at this point, but they've blown at least 3 double-digit leads this year. Once to Miami, once to the Giants, and there's another one that I'm missing in there. I forget who it was, but like
the Jets beat them too, right?
No, the Jets lost first game of the season. It was the first game of the season. Jets lost. There's another game in there that they lost. I can't remember which.
Aren't the Ravens and the Packers very similar in a way?
What do you mean?
Just losing the bad teams?
Well, yeah.
Losing the teams that they're supposed to be.
Yeah, this is kind of what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think with Lamar Jackson they're ever going to be bad, or at least not as long as he's the athlete that he is, which is unbelievable, right? Like, it's just so unique. There's nobody else like him. But I say this all the time. Think about like the run that Kansas City's been on with Patrick Mahomes. You went to 2 Super Bowls, like 4 AFC championship games, but you've only won 1 Super Bowl. And that one you were down halfway through the fourth quarter. Like, it's hard. And he's the best in the game. Like, once it comes to the playoffs, this is, I think, what people forget sometimes. They see Lamar like he goes off against Miami, or he goes off against Cincinnati, or whatever it is. Once you get to the playoffs, number one, the intensity is amped up, right? So, like, they're not just dropping into their zones and like, oh, well, whatever happens. Number two, the coaches are being way more specific about their game plans and how to stop your strengths. And they're going to take away your strengths and say, go beat us with your weaknesses. And that's what I mean by, like, it's hard, dude. These teams are not just playing their basics. Like, they're giving you everything they got, and they're coming after your strength. They're going to stop your strengths. You have to be able to throw the football and throw it really, really well. Peyton Manning is one of the greatest quarterbacks in history, and he won 1 Super Bowl with the Colts and got really lucky landing on the Broncos because he couldn't throw the ball 35 yards that last season. They just had that great of a defense. Like, it's hard. It's hard to just assume, well, he's great, they're going to win. No, dude, you have to be able to do lots of things. And, you make a great point. They're a fun team to watch. Like, that's a fun team to watch. And what you're really saying is Lamar Jackson is fun to watch.
Right.
But I don't know that they're a contender. I don't know that. I still look at them and I say, if you're giving up double-digit leads to the Dolphins and the Giants, I don't know that you're a contender.
Well, look at the division that they play in.
Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and the Browns right now.
So it doesn't take much.
Right? Do you think they're going to win that division?
There.
You think they win that division?
Who else?
Cincinnati.
Yeah,
they're kind of hit or miss this year too.
Exactly. Yeah. Which team shows up on Sunday? Yeah.
So, yeah, I it's really easy. We see one game and we're like, oh, dude, this is a contender. This is a team that could win the Super Bowl. You're forgetting the fact that 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they lost to Miami. Like, they were up by 2 touchdowns and lost to Miami. Whatever it is. Like, we so quickly, we forget how a team plays the whole season, or what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years. We've seen this story. They're really good. With Lamar Jackson there, they're really good. I always take it back to, God, what was it now? It might be 3 years ago now. But it's just a great microcosm. I think it was like week 14, Baltimore played San Diego. This is back when San Diego was San Diego with Phillip Rivers.
Oh,
and
okay.
Baltimore beat them, and they beat them like pretty good. And everybody's like, "Oh shit! Like, this might be a potential matchup in the first round. This is what's going to happen." And then San Diego went to Baltimore, and they smashed them. They beat them like, I shouldn't say smashed them. Smashed them isn't fair, but they beat them pretty handily. Baltimore tried to make a late comeback, but it wasn't going to happen. And that's kind of my point. Like, I've seen nothing that either Lamar Jackson has done or that the Baltimore Ravens do that's any different than what I saw at that point. Like, they're fun to watch. They beat bad teams most of the time. Sometimes they don't, but they're a team that's going to win 9, 10, 11 games every year. He's too good. He's too good of an athlete. Not so much a passer, but he's too good of an athlete for bad teams and most teams to stop him. But when it comes down to the playoffs and teams are focusing on saying, well, we're not going to let this guy do this to us, I just think it's a little different story. All right, why don't we take this to college football? I'm going to start on a kind of negative note here, and then we'll get to some interesting stuff. Make it really simple, and this is like upsetting to me. What happened to Miami, Florida State?
It used to be a good game.
Oh my God. It used to be like a what? This is like sad to me.
That was college plus CTV.
Oh my God. This was the game. Like, if you go back, how many years now? Well, I guess that's the problem, right? If you have to go back that far, then it's not what it was. But there was a time where there was no bigger game week in and week out, or season in, season out, than Miami versus Florida State. Like,
I mean, you have to go back to Bobby Bowden, Jimmy Johnson days.
yeah, no, absolutely. As I was saying, like, I was saying to Scotty, like, it was in the late 80s, all of the 90s and early 2000s. Like, there were two games every year that you looked forward to. You got to remember at this point, there's no Nick Saban at Alabama. I don't even know if he was at LSU yet, if I'm being honest. He might not even have been at LSU yet in early 2000s. But the two big games before the season even started, there was two games that you were amped up for. You were looking at it. So when are these guys playing? It was Miami versus Florida State, and it was Ohio State, Michigan. Ohio State, Michigan, clearly that's still a huge game, and that's coming up in a couple weeks, I guess. But Jesus Christ, Florida State played Miami last weekend. I don't know. What the hell was the final score? It was like 45-3 or something like that.
Yeah, Miami's awful. It's
embarrassing. And they were all jacked up because where the hell is it? 45-3. And the game was at Miami. And they were all jacked up in the beginning of the season because they got Mario Cristobal here. He's a Miami guy. This is the guy. We're back in contention.
We got rid of the turnover chain. Well, good for you.
Everything's better now, right? Like, now that nonsense is out of the way, now we're professional. We're grown up now. Yeah. We're not doing that nonsense. Yeah, maybe go back to the turnover chain. And what's funny about it is, as a Florida State fan, you would think I don't want Miami to be good. I want Miami to be good because I'm a college football fan, and college football is better if Miami is good.
It's better based on rivalries.
Absolutely. Forget about Florida State, Miami. What about like when we would see, Miami versus Notre Dame? What the hell was that game called? The Catholics,
Saints and Sinners.
The Saints and Sinners, or the Catholics versus the criminals, or
something like that. Catholics, criminals.
Yeah, like, dude, that's awesome. That's a week's worth of stuff. Like, that's a week's worth of talking and having fun and build up.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah, let me hear it.
I know you're going to get into, well, go ahead. I'll let you go. And when you get into the next little segment, I got the question.
Okay. So, yeah, it's disappointing. Like, what's funny is I'm a Florida State fan. They win 45-3. I didn't even watch 5 minutes of this game. Like, I want that game to matter. And so, yeah, I'm a Florida State fan, but here I am, hand raised. I want Miami to be better because this is boring as shit. I'd rather play Wake Forest or Clemson, for Christ's sake. Yeah. Come on, get your shit together. I think Florida State is on the right track. I think they're improving little bits in year. I would love it to be faster, but it's taking a little longer. But there's clearly improvement. Miami's going in the other direction. I want them to be good. I need them to be good because I want that rivalry to matter. And college football, I said this, I don't know how many weeks in a row now, how many years in a row. College football needs Alabama. They need Ohio State, Michigan. They need Miami. They need Texas. They need USC. They need Oklahoma. You need those teams. You want them to be good, everybody, because you need a team to hate. It's not just about who you like. You need a team to hate. That's what makes the Yankees such a cool team. It's not because everyone loves them. It's because most people hate them. You have to have the villain. Anyone who watches pro wrestling, like you and I, Ralph and I we went to the original WrestleMania. We were the first ones ever to go to a WrestleMania. This was going back quite some time. You don't have
wrestling. Baby.
Yeah, sure. I took you, right? You don't have professional wrestling if there's no villain. It's not good guy versus good guy. It's always good guy versus bad guy. Now, Miami, often, and Ohio State, sometimes Texas, and often USC, they play the role of bad guy. And you need that. The sport needs that. It can't just be SEC and a couple teams in the Big Ten. Like, you need these. You really do. Trust me. Even if you're a TCU fan, you want Texas to be good because you want the win to matter.
Well, I think you need to have some decent college football west of the Mississippi.
Absolutely.
It can't be everything on the East Coast, the SEC, the Big Ten. I mean,
and 90% of what's on the East Coast is in the Southeast.
Right.
Like, it's 100% correct. You need it to expand a little bit, man. The problem with college football, I love college football, so they're never going to lose me. But the problem with college football in general right now is it's become so regional. Like it's pretty much a Southeastern sport and nobody else gives a shit. I'm sure you've seen, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or anywhere else, some of the attendance that has gone on at some of these Pac-12 games, whether it's UCLA, Stanford. Dude, when you're UCLA or Stanford and you have less than 10,000 people in the stands, we have a problem.
Well, there's a lot more to do out there. I mean, you got beautiful weather and you have numerous entertainment choices in California. Whereas if you go to Norman, Oklahoma, not many options on a Saturday.
Yeah, but you know what? Tennessee fills 110,000 people, and they have Nashville right there, Miami and Florida State, and all these Florida teams. They fill the place. And it's not like they've never filled it. The reason the Rose Bowl is the home for UCLA is because historically speaking, before this year, they fill the joint. Like USC, that place is enormous, but like they tend to fill the joint. There's a difference between full house and we have 7,500 people here. Like I think I had more than 7,500 people at my first high school game start, and I'm not exaggerating. Like I think we had more people in the stands at Clifton High School. Like that's crazy.
That place drew.
Well, yeah, listen, they came to see the man. What can I tell you? So I would like to see Miami step up their game, but two teams that have stepped up their game played this weekend. It was definitely the biggest game of the weekend, and it left its footmark on kind of what we're looking at moving forward with the playoffs. Georgia beat Tennessee. I think the final score is 27-14, but the game was really never quite that close. But it wasn't a blowout. I wouldn't call it a blowout, but it was handily won. And Tennessee had just beaten Alabama a couple weeks before that. Who are your top four teams?
Well, I'd have to go Georgia,
Sure.
Ohio State, Michigan.
And then what, right?
And then what? Herein lies my point that I was going to make earlier that I was saving up. There's one team that consistently shoots itself right in the ass week one, and that is the Oregon Ducks. They got balls to schedule the games that they schedule, but schedule them maybe week 4.
I know.
Create a buzz about yourself. Beat a patsy. But now you're like, well, you're an afterthought after week 1. If they don't play that game until last week, or now you're talking, well, look at Oregon. Yeah, they ran 6-0 until they went into Georgia. Right. They got creamed.
Right. I think you make a great point. Now, in Oregon's defense, that game that they scheduled week 1 against Georgia was probably scheduled 2 years ago. So they didn't know they were going to have a new coach or a new coordinator and blah, 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 and Bo Nix and all that stuff. But
it's a marquee game. You're a marquee team.
I was just going to say, they didn't schedule that as a home and home. So it's not like they get Georgia home next year. And number 2, does it have to be week 1? Yeah. Like, to your point, like, do we have to do it week 1?
Yeah, I mean, get a warm-up game in first.
Yeah, go play.
There's no preseason, so you're scrimmaging against what, the JV?
Right, that's what I'm saying. Go play Succasana State for game 1, and then play Georgia or something like that.
Exactly.
No, you make a great point because
just like who looked at that schedule in Oregon and said, "Yeah, good idea." Unless they thought their team was something special.
Well, this is what I'm saying. The schedule was made 2 years ago, so you don't know what the hell your team's going to look like 2 years from now. But just be smart.
Willie Taggart was coaching back when they made
you brought that name back for us, right? Willie Taggart. I think by that point he was at Florida State.
But really, if Oregon doesn't lose that game, or say they didn't play that game, yeah, then you're talking about Oregon.
No, you're top 4. Absolutely. But here's my point about the time scheduling even. If you play them week 4, 5, 6 now, whatever, I don't know. You got some team. You're like some people are saying shouldn't have scheduled them all. And I'm saying maybe just schedule them later. If Oregon played Georgia right now, that game probably doesn't go the same way. Like, I'm not saying
Bo Nix just transferred there this year, right?
This is what I'm saying.
First snap as a Duck
It's against Georgia.
The Lions then.
Oh, bro, this is brutal. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to say that Oregon would win that game, but I really do believe that it would be a significantly closer game. And maybe Oregon could win. Or why not schedule it at least for a neutral site? Like, why would you go to Georgia and not have them come to your place the following year? Like, yeah, just I will blame the scheduling a little bit on that, because even if forget Bo Nix transferring in, somebody's going to be your quarterback, and the chances are he's going to be a first-year quarterback. Like, get a couple games under your belt, see who you are, make some adjustments, make some coaching adjustments, and then
can you imagine if Ohio State, Michigan played week 1? You'd be going, why are you doing that?
Yeah, why? Yeah, why? Exactly. And to be honest with you, even to take this a step further, I'd kind of be interested in seeing Oregon versus Georgia right now. Like,
exactly.
Oregon's smoking everyone who comes their way, including beating USC, like pretty handily. So
by week 3, you sort of know what you got, and you know where you need to improve.
And you've made some adjustments. Exactly. Like, you don't even know who you are, especially, like, to your point, new head coach, new quarterback, new coordinators. Go play Georgia.
Yeah. Oh, by the way.
Like, yeah, not the best. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Okay, you could put Oregon in that conversation. I have 3 teams that I'm looking at, and I'm like, well, how do you decide? And frankly, you could even have a 4th if we run, well, really even a 5th. I'm going to throw 5 teams at you. I'll throw 5 teams at you. How about this? Because we still have some games left, and who knows what's going to happen based on the conferences. You have Tennessee, who beat Alabama. You have USC, whose only loss right now is at Utah, which is a hell of a place to go play. You have TCU, who is undefeated, folks. This is a TCU team who is undefeated. They're one of the few teams left that's undefeated in the Big 12. I know the Big 12 is not the SEC. It's not the Big 10. It's not the Pac. Well, I don't know if it's the Pac-12. That's good. That's a conversation that we can have, whether or not they're equal to, less than, or better than the Pac-12. But regardless, as we sit here right now, TCU is undefeated. And if they were to run the table, that means they beat Texas and they beat whoever ends up being in the Big 12 championship game. That's something. And then you have these 2 lost teams, LSU and Alabama. LSU just beat Alabama, and Alabama's Alabama. They're probably the furthest on the outside, but they're still Alabama. And what's interesting about Alabama is that they may have a chance of still being in the SEC championship game. That doesn't even talk about the fact that Ohio State and Michigan are going to play each other, and the loser of that game is probably only going to have 1 loss.
And they're done.
Which, I don't know. Are they?
Well,
this is what has to be hashed out.
It seems the way, if history repeats, well, let's just say it this way. If Ohio State beats Michigan, no shot. Michigan beats Ohio State's still in there. I don't know why, but that's the way it goes.
Which is wrong, yeah. And to your point, if you don't win that Ohio State-Michigan game, either team, whoever loses, what's your quality win outside of that game?
Yeah, there's not many.
There's not too much to point to. Like, Tennessee, even though Tennessee just lost to Georgia, they can still point to the fact that they beat Alabama. So that's, you got to be able to point to some. This is what I mean, even about TCU. Like, you can say what you want about their schedule, but at some point they're going to go through Texas, Oklahoma State, and whoever they end up playing in a Big 12 championship. Like, those are real teams. LSU will have beaten Alabama also. So this is what's the problem with Michigan and Ohio State, is that they don't have that other team on their schedule. Was it Penn State? I mean, they both beat Penn State. Neither one of them was terribly competitive games. So, like, it's clear those teams are clearly a level below. So Mike Dean just commented, this is why there has to be an 18 playoff at least, and I would suggest a 12 team. I would take 8. I'd be satisfied with 8, because I think it's hard for anybody outside of 8 to really make an argument to winning a championship. but it looks like they're going to 12 to give
I mean,
buys or whatever.
the 13th team, did they get screwed?
Yeah, that's what I'm
I
saying.
don't
Like
think
it's
so.
it's
Yeah.
if you got 8 teams, TCU is in if they're undefeated. You know, if you're let's see who if you're North Carolina and you're the 9th ranked team in the country, you're not going to get a lot of like if here's the point. If TCU stays undefeated but they don't make the playoffs, there's an argument there. There's a legitimate, serious, well thought out, well articulated argument of why they should be in it. If there's 8 teams, they're in. If there's 8 teams and you're North Carolina ranked number 9, you just don't have a lot of people backing you on that one. They're like, well, dude, you guys lost to like Liberty. So you don't get
Who did Liberty just beat this week?
Arkansas.
Oh,
Arkansas. But yet Arkansas is only like a 2.5 point underdog to LSU. Fishy, as Scotty would say, fishy. Strange line. So yeah, it's just 4 is just not enough. It doesn't mean so. Like I hear this all the time on Colin Cowherd, where he says, "Well, are you trying to argue that TCU could win the national championship? Probably not." But we saw Cincinnati compete with Alabama in that game last year. That game was 7-3 for like most of the first half, 17-3 going into midway through the third quarter. Like it was certainly closer than Clemson. Was it Clemson? Georgia, Michigan. Like that game was a blowout right from the jump. Whereas Cincinnati actually hung. I like to see TCU's or the Boise States or the Cincinnati's. I want to. It gives me some. I'm not a fan of those teams, so it gives me something to root for the underdog. I just saw a ranking the other day of like, I think it was like 10 greatest college football games of all time. Guess what was ranked number 2 or 3? It was that Boise State, Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl from like 10, 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was.
The Statue of Liberty play and all that.
Yeah, because it was incredible. And unless you're an Oklahoma fan, you were probably rooting for Boise State just because you're not an Oklahoma fan. You want something different. So it's not the playoff isn't so much like if it was just about who could win the championship, then we wouldn't need 64 teams in the March Madness. Like anything past the, I don't know, 12th ranked team is not winning the national championship.
Right.
But it's fun and we love it. And you might get TCU to beat one of those teams. And if they beat one of them, it's worth it. Or if it's even just close and they make a game of field. If they played, let's say they played Ohio State and they lost by a field goal, it would be worth it to me that they were in because it was great. It was unexpected. It wasn't the typical shit that we see year in and year out. So that to me is why it needs to expand. Plus, just for the sake of fairness, you cannot just say, well, if TCU were to play Alabama, they wouldn't beat them. Wouldn't you just rather play the game?
I'd rather play the game.
Let's just play the game. Like, let's just be smart about it and play the damn game. So, yeah, Mike writes, you have to have the major conference championships at least represented. I would think that in most cases, yeah, you need the championship. But if you had 8 teams or 12 teams, you would have conference champions would be automatic bids. And then anybody outside those conference champions, that could just go off the rankings. So it would be a lot better. And a team like TCU would just make it. They would make it and we wouldn't have to argue about it. They're in. Now that doesn't mean they have to be a top seed. They could be a 5, 6, 7 seed, however it shakes out. But they should be in, and it just makes it simpler and it stops the argument. Because to your point, like it's one thing if you're the 5th team and you're undefeated, as we've seen a few times in the past years, and you get left out, that's a real argument. But if you're the 9th team and you have 2 losses, the undefeated team, there's a lot of people that get behind that team and say they deserve a chance. The 9-2 team, there's not the same level of support,
It's a tough argument to win.
It really is. Like, oh yeah, you should be in. Ahead of who? Ahead of LSU? Like, no, you have no chance there. So
we played Colgate tough now.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, that Liberty game was on the road. Give me a break. All right. All right, one last thing. We've did 3 NFL stories, 2 college football stories. We have 1 HL story. Ralph, take us and tell us what's going on here in the NHL right now. Total chaos.
Well, the season just started up. And for those of you who do not know me, I'm a New York Ranger fan.
As you can tell by the background and the hat.
My background, I made a man cave in my Florida room. God bless my wife, Mary, for letting me do this.
She is a saint.
So I'm all excited for this NHL season, and my Rangers are, stumbling out of the block a little bit.
Now, they had a good season last year.
They had awesome. They overachieved
Right.
last year.
Okay.
But the teams that are getting off to the great starts are not the teams that you expected. The Devils,
Oh,
the Islanders.
how about the Flyers? Mike Dean is a Flyers fan.
That was my third one. The Islanders. Tortorella hated that team. When your coach talks shit about you and you hate them, and all of a sudden you're playing like gods for him. Don't tell me that guy's not a good coach.
Right.
Not politically correct.
Perhaps
Very
not.
rough around the edges, but the guy's getting results.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Who are the
Rangers are gonna bounce back strong.
Who are the disappointments so far this year? Like, who are the real team? You're like, oh, they're supposed to be great, and they're not showing up right. Just yet.
Always, your Washingtons with the Ovechkins, Pittsburgh, Sidney Crosby. Those teams that are always there, getting long in the tooth. I mean, the Washington Capitals, they went out and got the Avalanche goalie, Darcy Kemper. Guy won the Stanley Cup last year.
Right.
Got shit on ice. He's letting in, AAA goals.
Well, what's interesting is when we were watching, you kind of got me excited. Well, I've always been interested in playoffs hockey, but talking to you last year when it came to hockey playoff season, you were like, dude, you got to watch. And so I was watching the finals, and you were the one who said to me, like, Colorado is so fast, but their goalie kind of stinks, but they did enough that it didn't matter, And so he gets signed, and it's like, well, no, he really does stink, especially when you put him on a not great team, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But it's a great game to watch, man. It's just a lot of fun.
It's interesting that you say that the NHL is getting off to a chaotic start, an odd start, kind of an upside down start, because the NBA is very similar right now. The Lakers, I think, are 2-8, 2-7, something like that. LeBron already bailed out of last night's game.
What did he sit out this game for?
He left the game early because sore groin. His left nut. Yeah, his left nut was a little tight, so he pulled out against the Clippers. And on the East Coast, you have Kevin Durant's Brooklyn, used to be New Jersey Nets team, who's 3-5. They won last night, but total chaos there with the letting go of the coach. You got the Kyrie Irving, just weird banana shit.
What do you do with that? What do you do with Kyrie Irving?
Dude, you know what? I want to tell you something. The whole thing was so uncomfortable to me that I didn't even dive into what he posted and what was in it.
I don't know anything. I know it was Jews and blacks.
Something like that. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? This whole thing is gross. I don't even want to, I don't even want to watch it or get into it because it just, I feel like if I did, I'd need to take a really strong shower.
They should lock Kyrie Irving and Brian Westbrook in a room together and just leave them there.
What they should do is they should take the mouth version of a chastity belt and just take this thing and I don't know, like a Hannibal Lecter mask and just put it on Kyrie's face and just say, and take any, computer devices away from him. No phones, no computers. So he's not allowed to tweet and he's not allowed to talk, but just go out and play basketball. Dude, that would be a really dangerous player because when he just plays basketball, he's pretty goddamn good. It's just everything else. I mean, he's a fucking flat earther for Christ's sake.
He is. I mean, he must have had a tremendous amount of backers when he first. Oh, Kyrie.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he pulls that shit last year with the vaccines.
Right.
I was like, well, he's right. And then he loses a bunch of a bunch of his fans. Then he starts burning that sage all around. And you're like, the hell? So he probably lost a few more people. Now with this whole thing, I mean, his circle of friends is,
Kevin Durant is even starting to be like, maybe I don't like this guy. So
Maybe your fan base is abandoning you.
Kevin Durant's very like, I used to see this guy like once a month, and he was really fun to be around. But being around him every day, he's kind of a dick.
Well, skinny legs Durant.
Holy shit. But it's just fascinating because to your point, like NHL is a little upside down. NBA is a little upside down. I think, well, maybe it's not. I was going to say, I think it's a little different in the NBA, but I don't. You brought up the fact that there's a number of guys in the NHL that are getting a little long in the tooth. Like the fact that we're still talking about Ovechkin and Crosby and some of these guys is pretty unbelievable. I know NHL players have long careers and all that, but it's amazing. But I think it's similar in the NBA. Like the LeBrons and those guys are getting older, and you wonder how much of like the John Morants and some of these other younger players are. I don't know that they're quite ready to take over, but they're kind of nipping at the heels. You can tell, listen, there was clearly a transition period that took some years from when Jordan left the NBA to when LeBron and really when Kobe was a big deal and that kind of thing. There's a period of time where the fans have to get used to someone else being the king. And I think we're kind of at the beginning of that time, maybe also in the NHL, but certainly to me in the NBA.
Getting back to the NHL, did you see that Evander Kane injury?
I didn't. Tell me about that.
He plays for Edmonton. He's a winger. They're playing in Tampa Bay. There was a play up against the boards. Like three guys knocking into each other. Guy goes down to the ice. His hand is down. Guy comes with a skate and just nicks his wrist.
Blood everywhere.
I mean, blood all over the ice. He's running. He had the presence of mind to apply pressure because he knew exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Out 3 to 4 months.
Oh, my God, dude.
I mean, those skates are sharp.
Yeah, well, no matter what, that's freaking metal sliding across your wrist at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It could be pretty dull, and it's still going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the difference. Hockey players, they got to fight. They got a concussion. Now they have concussion protocol.
Right.
Which is the smartest thing in the world.
Of course.
But these guys are fighting to come back on the ice. Meanwhile, you got LeBron saying that he's got a hemorrhoid. You know, I got a backache. I got a booger in my eye. I mean, the excuse that these guys come up with.
It's very dangerous in the NBA. You can't play like that, you know.
Unreal.
No, but to your point, like, yeah, we got even football players like lying down on the ground, which not unusual. It's not weird. There's nothing wrong with that. But you got a guy whose wrist was literally slit and he just holds it and skates off himself.
Yeah. Oh, God. Can you imagine LeBron?
Can we give the guy a hand here?
They would have medevaced him out. They would have dropped in a basket from the roof of the forum over there.
You would think so. Dude, that might be the right thing to do. Like,
jeez.
Guy's wrist or neck is slit. Maybe we should be take a little more care of that guy and not just say, yeah, come on off.
Like, you remember years ago with Dale Howardchuk, he was a goalie. Guy's
the
neck slit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I brought it up. Like, yeah, probably had to skate off himself. It's ridiculous. Little blood trail behind him. It's like a freaking Manson scene. It's ridiculous.
Be a man, play hockey.
Yeah. Oh my God. You'll have no teeth, but it'll be fun to watch. Oh my God. Ralph, thank you for joining us, Cousin Ralph, on the Bump and Run podcast. Absolutely. We'll have to have you back. Thank you very much.
All right. We'll see you Sunday.
All right. You got it. For Cousin Ralph, I'm Pete Colasano. You've been listening to Bump and Run, and we'll catch you guys next week. And as Scotty would say, later. I don't do it as good as he does. All right, we're good. Cool, man. Yeah, it ended up being just short of an hour.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. For very little prep, I think it went pretty well.
Yeah. Come by Sunday, man. We'll have a blast.
I may be hanging out, and we'll see what goes on. I'll let you know by tomorrow. Either way.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. I'll send this to you in a little while.
Okay. Peace out.
Later.